So without further ado, we're going to move into our last panel of the day. And I'd like to introduce to you our moderator for this panel, Anastasia Goodstein, who is with the Ad Council here today. Welcome to the podium. Thank you.
Should I use this or should I stand here?
You can use either one, whatever you'd like. If you want to sit comfy, you're welcome to do that.
Sit on the couch. Great. Got one more guy. Am I on? Can you guys hear me? No, now I am. Great. All right, wonderful. So how many of you are familiar with the Ad Council? A few people. How about Smokey the Bear? Yeah, Vince and Larry, the crash test dummies, McGruff, taking a bite out of crime. We are the oldest public service advertising organization in the country. We've been putting out campaigns in the public interest since 1942. And my role there is to oversee all of the digital pieces of these campaigns as they come together. We have had campaigns in the higher ed space. Have you all heard of the slogan, "A mind is a terrible thing to waste"? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's our campaign with UNCF that has been around also a very long time, as well as a new campaign that we just launched around teaching and getting young people who are juniors and seniors in high school as well as in college interested in education into going into teaching. We're going to need a lot of new teachers, and we want the best and the brightest. So that's a little bit about me and the Ad Council. I'm really excited to have this great group of guys that I've gotten to know through interviewing them and our phone calls, and we're going to talk about this exciting new space of lifelong learning. So what I'm going to do is sort of throw to them and have them first just introduce themselves, say a little bit about what your company does and its role as you see it in the space. And then I'm going to ask some questions. We're going to have sort of a conversation up here and hopefully get you guys involved in the conversation. So we'll discuss, and then I'm going to open it up for questions so we can all sort of share in this conversation. So let's start with you and with creativeLIVE.
Cool. My name's Chase Jarvis. I don't know if I'm on, but my name's Chase Jarvis. I'm the co-founder of a company called creativeLIVE, which is the world's largest live education platform. We believe that creativity is the new literacy, and so we offer courses from Pulitzer Prize winners, New York Times bestsellers, the best in the world in courses in photography and video, art and design, music and audio, the maker and craft movement, and entrepreneurialism and business.
Great.
Hi, I'm Eric Korb. I'm the CEO of Accreditrust, and we're in the business of curation of digital certificates or digital credentials and in the validation of them. So as we go through our lifelong learning experience, we have achievements that we make over the course of our lives, and we'd like to acknowledge those, and the vessels that we're using today is what is known as a digital badge. And we are in that business of curating and creating a central repository so that those badges can be held for the life of the learner.
I'm Andrew Smith-Lewis. I'm the founder and executive chairman of SarahGo, and we have created the world's first memory management platform. It's designed to allow anyone to really manage their memory and quantify their knowledge. It helps them learn faster and remember longer, but it also creates a dynamic profile of their learning on a very granular level that they can view themselves or they can share with others. We're an open platform. We're open for individuals to create content, for universities to create content, and for anyone to take part in not only the learning process, but the creation and the remixing of learning.
Okay. I'm Dennis Yang. I'm the president of Udemy. We operate a marketplace for online courses where any teacher, instructor, or expert can teach online. Our courses are self-paced, on demand, and primarily delivered via video. And they tend to be more skill-based in nature or focus.
That's great. So thank you all. Let's step back and sort of define what lifelong learning is. I mean, it's sort of sounds like it's becoming its own little buzzword. So I would love for each of you to sort of talk about what it means in the context of your business and what you do.
Are we just going to keep going? Sure, I'll
First
kick off.
up.
I'm happy to do it.
Anybody
I'm happy
can
to
jump
do it.
in. We
All
can
right,
mess up the order.
For me, it's a travesty that somehow our culture to date has believed or has built a system that points to the fact that we basically stop learning at age 22 in and around 22. That's catastrophic in my mind because we all know, I think probably most of the people in this room, most of their learning experiences or their positive learning experiences have been later in life or certainly as an adult. So the idea of lifelong learning has always been in place, but the fact that the institutions, the framework that our cultures are built on is just now recognizing that is part of the travesty that, at least at CreativeLIVE, we're trying to unlock.
Great.
I don't know why.
Yeah, anybody else? We can switch up the order. Dennis.
Yeah, so from our perspective, similar to Chase, we view lifelong learning as pretty much any type of learning that happens outside of more of a formal academic setting or structure, if you will, whether that's K-12, whether that's higher ed, and also as Chase mentioned, the world is changing so quickly, so people inherently have to keep up the speed on all sorts of things, whether it's on a personal level for enrichment purposes or for corporate training, if you will, from a skill-based development perspective. But more and more we find that consumers really want to take control of their own learning, if you will, and they don't really have a place to go. So outside of their, the traditional formal settings that we've provided in the past. So that's part of our mission that we're trying to fulfill.
I agree with my esteemed co-panelists. I think they've defined it very well. For us, we're looking at the fact that we go through this learning process and then we kind of get, not only do we stop learning in some ways, but we also lose touch with that information, right? So all of us in this room are probably very highly educated. Somebody spent a lot of money to get us to where we've gotten to, but where's all that information? Where's all that knowledge? How many of us really remember this? And throughout the day, some of the panelists were asking who still remembers calculus, et cetera. It's kind of funny, but it's kind of sad, too, because so much time and energy goes into it, and where is it? And we want to build a world where you can constantly refer back to that, where if you need to access Spanish that you studied in college, you've got a system that's creating this profile of where you are and ready to reactivate your memory at any point in your life. So we want you to continue going to take great courses from folks like this, but also to be able to measure and track that and hold on to that forever.
And our role, Accreditrust's role in all this is really in the records of it, the evidence. And so by having that evidence available for you to make it portable, it becomes part of your social equity, right, or social currency. So as we've always liked to be acknowledged, when we were kids, we got gold stars or we earned badges in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts. And today we have diplomas on our wall. Now it's moving to a digital representation. And so now we have the ability to be almost three-dimensional, where we can see not only the evidence of what you've done, but also how you got there. And so we're all about exchanging that information and making it a currency for you as you move through your lifelong learning experience.
All right, so when I brought up MOOCs, I was told that you're supposed to say it like MOOCs. And I don't know if you guys just told me that to embarrass myself, which I just did. But supposedly, this is the year of the MOOC. How important are course completion rates in these courses? And what do you guys, or some of you can sort of raise your hand to answer, think can be done to increase these completion rates?
Okay, everyone's looking at me. So, so at Udemy, we don't actually focus on completion rates for a couple of reasons. The first one is we actually believe more in a competency-based model, in a model where in future people actually look at the signal. They look less at the signal of how much time did you sit in the seat, rather as opposed to can you actually do something? Can you actually prove that you did something? So that's the most important thing that we gauge relative to, I should say, providing value. The second thing is, when you look at some of the content that we provide, as an example, let's say you want to learn intermediate Microsoft Excel for your job. Okay, so we've got a course that's 5 to 10 hours worth of content. It's broken out into 30 or 50 individual lectures. If you actually already know the content and the material in, say, lectures 1 through 8, there's no value and no reason that we would want you to go and sit through and learn that, relearn that, if you will, at all for that, from the student's perspective. So in our minds, we look more at ultimately, if we're providing value from a learning perspective to that student, and we're giving them what they need to learn, they'll come back to that course, or they'll come back and learn other material from other courses. So it's not so much did they actually sit through every single individual lecture, what does that actually prove? Because again, we believe in a world that's going to be moving towards this competency-based model, if you will.
Yeah, I'll second that. The future, I don't know, this might be a little bit provocative, but the future of education is skill-based. The folks that were on the panel before us, I think they have a slightly different challenge at the K through 12, but certainly as an adult, the future is skill-based. The idea of completion rate is for someone who doesn't want to do something. You have to make them complete something. That's one of the reasons we don't spend any time and energy focusing on trying to get someone through something, because getting them through that is likely just going to empower them to forget it more painfully later. They don't care about it. Mm-hmm. If learning is self-directed, as the future is, if there are more choices, if anyone in here has watched a 10-year-old learn, they learn the things that they want to learn like that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't ask them to learn other things, but as lifelong learners, post primary and secondary education, we have decided that that's not something that is of interest to us at all. The people that are here, we have courses that have 150,000 people in them sometimes, and they're there because they want to be there. Mm-hmm. So it's a much different world, and I think it's evolving rather quickly. And the folks that don't believe that, I think there's a little bit of a head in the sand mentality. And I'm not saying that we don't need to encourage people to learn things that they don't maybe want to learn, but it's certainly not a focus for us. And I think as an industry, we need to re-examine the actual question of how can we get people to do things they don't like to do more. Yeah. It's a shitty question, right?
Well, but Chase, I agree with you. I think completion rate's not a great barometer, and it's early days, and it's hard, but you need some way of measuring, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have 150,000 people start a course and 7% complete it, your average bear would think that's not terrific, something's wrong. And I think that's part of the pressure that the MOOCs are facing.
The part that I think is wrong is that they're in the wrong class.
Are they in the wrong class, or are they getting something out of it? Maybe they just don't need the whole course. Maybe they're in there, they got what they need, and they're out. But
so I wouldn't want to measure their completion, right? I would ask them if they got what they wanted.
Well, sometimes it's all about just participation, right?
Sure.
It's just learning is just being participatory.
And maybe you're taking it as a survey. So completing it isn't the objective. And I'm not saying that there's not ultimately a need to have our toddlers get through something so that we can move them. Look at the system that we're living in right now is built on the factory and the farm. The factory took raw material, put it in one end, chug, 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 and out the other it came a widget. And all those widgets are designed to look exactly the same. And if we have an education system that's built on the factory was something from the last century. So if we're working so hard to build something that looks like the last century, we're going to be very sorry in the next century.
I think it also is about motivation. Mm-hmm. I mean, what's really motivating you to be there? Are you more just acquisitive? Some of people are maybe attending some of these courses just because they've never experienced online education before. Yeah. And they're just now re-entering into the world of lifelong learning and expanding their mind. So that's maybe why there is low completion rates, and they're just testing the waters or getting their mind ready to go on to the next level for themselves.
I mean, I also wonder how much of it is distraction. Speaking for myself, like if there's something that I want to learn to do my job better, especially in like career development, but because I'm a working mom, I only have like this window of time where my work is supportive of me doing it, but when I'm doing it, I have like 3 windows open and a bunch of other distractions happening as well. So I wonder if completion also ties into just like our ability to focus. And I'm curious, like, what is it about your courses that the way that they're being presented that kind of can also contribute to people being able to focus enough to complete them.
I want my doctor to complete his or her course, right? Like, yeah. And that's one of the reasons we chose not to be in that, because policing the thing that people might not want to be doing is not a goal of our company. And I think there are plenty of people who are in the conference today. Since it's a standing room only panel, you can let the people in the back. But like there are other people who are focused on that, and maybe those are ways for you guys to plug in. It's just not a game. It seems like a really hard problem.
I think I also agree with you that it's not the right measure, especially for the type of things you're talking about. I think part of the problem though is that with MOOCs in general, and this morning's conversation was very enlightening. There's not a lot of ways of getting quantitative data out of what's actually happening. So one of the things that we're doing is we're partnering with one of the major MOOC platforms, and what we'll do is build in a level of interactivity and that's geared at retention of knowledge, but it can be tracked on a very micro level. So you might have a bunch of people run in and run out, didn't complete, but they still got something out of it, and you can quantify what they got out of it. You can get the qualitative, hey, was this good for you? But you can get the quantitative, they were able to really retain certain skills from this program. And I think if you make it, if you don't look at the whole and you can break it into parts and let people take and remix what they want, you'll see more benefit from these programs.
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is I definitely think that there's an element of curiosity associated with taking a Stanford class. And
Yeah.
in some ways, the enroll button is a little bit like hitting the like button.
Yeah.
But once they get in there, they say, oh, okay, this is interesting. It's not kind of is what I thought it was. Maybe it's not what I thought it was, but I'm kind of done with it. So I think you kind of parse out and segment the
Very
people
true.
that are in there who have real intent in terms of what they want to get out of it.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about mobile, which is huge and everything's mobile. What role do you all see mobile playing in what you're doing?
How about with badges? Like, how do you guys think about it?
Well, badges in themselves are mobile, if you will. They're portable, they can be moved around, and they can be consumed in various ways. So from the mobile phone perspective, if that's the area that we're speaking about, the idea would be you could walk into an HR department, they could look at your badge application and show those badges and put them as a collection that creates, in a sense, a mosaic of all the things that you've achieved that makes that available for that person at that point in time to either scan a QR code or be able to digitally, with some of the Samsung phones, you can knock them together and pass the badge over to the next person. That would be consumed into their HR system, and the background check gets done. So that's where we see it going.
Cool.
I think for lifelong learning or just-in-time learning, mobile's key because you need to be able to, engage with the information wherever you want it. So I think, and also from the science side, we know that the magic recipe for retaining knowledge is little and often, which you're not going to get sitting in front of a PC for 2 hours, but you can get 3 or 4 times a day when you're interacting with your device. So I think mobile really is a driving force in this.
I like the term just-in-time learning. I think it's a really interesting term that we're going to see grow. One of my favorite things is you guys have all had this experience, I'm guessing, where you're sitting there and you can't remember something. Remember like in 1989, you're like, what was the name of the guy with the film and the thing? And now we got all that sorted out,
That's
right?
IMDb, right?
Yeah, we got, well, whatever.
Yeah, you
it's
don't
like
have
we
to
got it all
memorize
sorted
it,
out. We have the
yeah.
whole world's memory right here.
Yeah.
And I envision a future, and we at creativeLIVE envision a future where if I want to learn something right now for the next, if I'm going to take a picture of my golden retriever in the rain, I'm going to look up best pet photographer in the world, and I can take a 60-second lesson from them right on my phone.
That's
and
cool.
Yeah, to me, solving that immediacy, that like I want to know it right now, that is where we are trying to add value to the world.
So the question I have then from the last panel would be, now is that in your short-term memory or your long-term memory? So how many times will you have to go back to refer to that video, or do you really retain what you learned? I don't know.
Well, I guess the response would be that the smartest person in the world that I know is a guy named Ray Kurzweil. Ray Kurzweil, he predicted the singularity. People think he's way out there. He happens to be the chief, I think he's the chief engineer at Google. A lot of smart people there, and he's the head of the smart people. So go do your own math. And I asked Ray, I asked him a question about creativity and a question about learning. I said, what is your view of learning? And he said, people learn by doing. So if I get a lifelong lesson, or if I get a lesson, a just-in-time lesson, and I actually do it, presumably I'm going to look for it if it's just in time so that I can do it. And if I do it, I remember it. So
I think that's and I think if I'm taking a picture of my dog, or the example you give, it's a great one. Myself, if I need to do something in Photoshop, I look it up, I watch a video. Do I remember it long term? Maybe not. I may not need it long term. I just don't want my doctor doing that, right? Or I don't want the guy flying the plane doing that. Going, hey, does anybody have a Google connection right now? Because what is those red lights again on that engine? So
Absolutely.
it depends where you are in life. But I think for what we're talking about, it's great.
yeah, and I survey the realm of pop culture, and I think the amount of people that need to be certified and measured and governed and is microscopic relative to the general population. I do want my doctor, I want my pilot to be held in the highest esteem or the highest level of training. 99% of us, we have this, and we have our experiences, and I think those do a pretty good job of solving the problems, given that we didn't have those not too long ago, and we weren't all that worse off. So I think it's a bright future for just-in-time learning. I think that's a great phrase. This won't be the first time you've heard it. So.
Yeah, so from our perspective with regards to mobile, we've actually found that almost 25% of our users have downloaded some sort of one of our iOS applications, and so we're definitely seeing a lot of engagement. If anything, mobile is definitely the best tool for ongoing engagement. So we find that when our students use both a combination of desktop and mobile versus just desktop only, their aggregate content consumed goes up by multiples, if you will. So it makes sense if you think about the nature of the students that we're dealing with, which are, busy adults. They've got life, they've got career, family, and things like that. So having something on the go that they can take out for 60 seconds at a time is really important.
So let's sort of juxtapose what's happening in this space, in the lifelong learning space, with what you see happening in the traditional higher ed space, and what are sort of the key differences you see, and which space do you think is growing faster or will grow faster?
That's not one for me.
I'll take the which space is growing faster. I think without a doubt, this space of lifelong learning or informal learning has grown faster and will continue to grow faster for some period of time. If anything, you can think of a proxy, maybe not the best proxy, Wikipedia, one of the top 10 websites on the planet. And I mean, there's a low-cost form of curated content, if you will. But I think given the relative lack of, I guess I should say, when you go into more formal education where the traditional MOOCs are playing, and you have the regulatory or political concerns that you need to navigate relative to lifelong learning, I think it allows lifelong learning to grow a little bit more freely and quickly.
Yeah. When I listen to the folks that are driving the education space, call them MOOC or not, just folks that are focused on K-12 learning, the part that I'm optimistic about is that everyone's interested in trying to solve the problem. The part that I'm pessimistic about is there's this sort of a pandering to the existing system. And the pandering to the existing system is largely based on trying to get government dollars. And it's on how many of these can we get. It's sort of like, it's still holding on to the factory mentality, which the factory mentality, as we just talked about, is meant for the last century. So we're throwing, I would say 75% of our resources, governmental or big industry, in the K-12 world at a problem that's eroding so rapidly that we're solving the wrong problem. So I would say that I'm with you and with Dennis on the fact of how many people in this audience have kids, and how many of your kids have learned something from Sal Khan or off YouTube, how to play a guitar, play a note. Like, they all rush there immediately. So to me, I like that, and that is an intimation of the future path. And spending 75 to 95% of the resources on this system that is eroding is scary and frustrating to me. So,
one of the things I've observed as being a former CIO of an online college is that it's very hard for us to measure butts and seats, time in a seat, right? So we have to stop thinking about 120 hours in a classroom setting, because we just won't be able to achieve enough education that way, especially what we have facing in 2020. So really we have to look at competency-based. So I think what we offer in the online space is to be able to not have to worry about, does it take you 24 hours to learn this concept, or 5 minutes, or maybe it takes 5 weeks. But in the end of the day, it's the competency that really is what we're trying to establish. I don't know if I want my doctor to take
Right.
the exam.
Can we just
online,
exclude
but-
doctors and pilots?
Yes, we can do that. But I think it's all about trying to figure out the model that doesn't necessarily look at time-based. And I think also the governing bodies that accredit our institutions have to look at that as well. And
That's part of the part that freaks me out is they're still measuring asses and seats, which
Yep.
is the least accurate measure of, you know.
and how do you measure it digitally unless you have some kind of app on the other side to figure out if they're still alive over there?
Or on your bottom.
Right.
Well, it also seems like cost plays into this too, at least in the higher ed space, which begs the question about free versus paid and what you're offering, and what do you see in terms of business models and the value of each? I mean, obviously, compared to traditional higher ed, it's going to be probably much less, but anyone care to?
Well, I think it's sort of related to the previous question, and I think it's great to see a lot of new players. It's a new field, but they're new players, and we don't have the legacy and the institutional legacy of thought, of infrastructure, of costs, and of revenue to protect and guard. And I think that we heard from a lot of great publishers today who are talking about how they're really not about the what anymore, they're about the how, and things are changing, but the bottom line is they're giant publishers. And I'm not sure they hold the key to how education will transform and be disrupted. It wasn't a group of librarians who came up with Google. It was innovative technologists who thought differently and changed the game. And I think that's going to need to happen. And because all of us don't have that same type of pressure, we can play with things like free. And we can be much more disruptive where the Pearsons of the world can't just wake up and say, you know what, let's just give it all away and see what happens.
Well, that's part of my frustration. And I was like, if those folks are driving the conversation, they are clearly not interested in the new world. They are clearly interested in preserving the one that makes them the most money.
Has to be.
And and I'm not judging that. That's just fact because they have stakeholders and stockholders, and so their allegiance is to them. It's not to the learners.
No.
And so they're actually incented to migrate rather slowly and build systems and infrastructures that migrate slowly so that they can play. And that is it. Like you said, I think it was really astute to say that they can't play in the world that allows different socioeconomic groups or people of different socioeconomic status to participate. And unlike some of the freemium stuff that we're seeing in some of the younger, faster, more innovative, I don't think Silicon Valley has all the answers either, but there's certainly able to be experimentation, and that's where innovation comes out of experimentation. It doesn't come out of the status quo holding on to government money.
I just want to take a feel out here and see if anybody has any questions yet or so far. I have more that I can keep asking, but yeah.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment as far as it seems that with
You want one of these?
Google's doing a thing where they show you only what they think you're interested in, and I forgot the terminology for that. That's happening where it's shielding some from maybe a global search as opposed to making it more localized or U.S. or with your friends or however. And I think that that's important to consider if that's the future of where we're going in search, that any kind of education that we're looking at online that may compromise what someone might be able to learn.
Yeah, I think curated information from a highly trusted source is much more valuable than random search from a company that's interested in localizing their advertising around the people who are close to you to pay for you to learn. So I would bank on people that have an invested interest in me learning as opposed to this mystical cloud of where you know not.
So since we're at the International CES, let's talk a little bit about international. And if any of you all have seen sort of adoption of this happening in certain regions or countries apart from here where you see there's a lot of growth potential or it's really taking off.
Sure. So We definitely have seen a lot of interest from students outside the U.S. in particular. It's actually grown much more dramatically than we probably anticipated ourselves. And in some ways, it probably makes sense if you think about it on a relative basis compared to the U.S., the lack of high-quality skill-based content that exists outside the U.S. versus inside the U.S. I think within at least North America, we've got it pretty good on a relative basis. So I think this really starts to unlock when we can get a lot of more of this content that's rich, engaging, curated, and high quality available from instructors and from other countries speaking other languages, using different cultural cues, if you will. So I wouldn't be surprised just to see this ongoing, continuing expansion from an international student perspective relative to the U.S. In terms of the places that we're seeing most interest outside of, obviously, the content that we have by and large today is more English, though we do have Spanish speaking courses as well as Portuguese courses and other courses in other languages, if you will, but definitely in Latin America and some a little bit in Asia, but more of the traditional French, Italian, German, Spanish are some of the larger languages that we see interest from.
For SarahGo, we built the company in Japan. We actually went the other way around. So I lived there for 25 years, and 10 years ago built SarahGo, built the largest English language learning platform in the country, expanded to Brazil, and then we said, hey, America's an interesting place, so why don't we try the U.S.? So we actually just a year ago moved to the United States, and obviously, international is huge and so important for learning. It gets to the point where I think it's kind of almost silly to view markets. It's just one big giant soup. It's the way we look at it.
In our world, from the digital credential perspective, it's absolutely an international situation. As we all know, motivation works all the way down from K through 12, right up through our lifelong learning. So we participate each week on a weekly call, which is an open call. We see every country almost represented from week to week coming in and talking about initiatives that they're doing with badging. Maybe not have heard of the biggest one that happened recently in Chicago, Summer of Learning, although it was an international, but certainly we're part of this earth. So they issued over 200,000 badges to students who were working in a summer program there. So that was supported by the MacArthur Foundation and Mozilla. So it's happening, and it's happening at every level.
Yeah, and at CreativeLIVE, we educated more than 2 million people in 200 countries, or every country. We just picked 200 because whether the UN's right or Google's right, who the heck knows, we call it 200. And international is really important for us. A key that I'm personally, as a co-founder, highly motivated is providing access. Mm-hmm. Historically, education access has been the biggest thing, and whether that access is access to the world's best, which is one thing that we pride ourselves in, to the world's best experts, or transcending geography, because if you live in Nebraska, you might have less of a chance and opportunity to meet the person who did the thing that changed the world, who lives in New York, let alone Nairobi. So we hope to transcend those challenges of access. And then the final challenge I feel like that we are interested in transcending, which applies to the US but also to emerging markets, is transcending the cost barrier. That is, the average student debt coming out of college for the class of 2013 is projected, they're still doing the math, but it's projected to be $35,200. And that means for everybody who owes 10 grand, there's someone who owes 50. Mm-hmm. And that's catastrophic. Mm-hmm. And so if you think about an emerging market, there's no chance they can play, which is one of the reasons that CreativeLIVE is free. Yeah. Anyone in the world can tune in if you have an internet connection. So we're doing what we can, but we know that that's a huge part of living. It's not just living in a neighborhood that you want to live in, it's living in a world that you want to live in. So.
Mm-hmm. We do have another question here. Here
Fantastic.
you go.
Hi, Herb Coleman from Austin Community College in Austin, Texas. Earlier you mentioned Wikipedia, I think, as something helping with lifelong learning, but I thought Pinterest was more interested in that because I've seen more people learn through Pinterest. Can you address how you see social working in with lifelong learning?
We all look at you.
I've been talking about it. I'll tell you, because we're inherently social from the ground up. That is the mechanism through which you communicate with Pulitzer Prize winners, New York Times bestselling authors, and whatnot that are on our our platform. So I mentioned Nebraska. Whether you're in Nebraska or Nairobi and you have access to an internet connection, you can use Facebook and Twitter to communicate with these people in real time and get your questions asked and answered. And that, I feel like, education is broken, but learning is not broken. So we have to go back to the fundamental, whether you're in a classroom, a cave, or what we're trying to build is just scale all the things that are still working, and being able to ask someone a question when you have it, that is the best part of learning. That borders on mentorship at scale, apprenticeship at scale. And so I think the social platforms, Facebook, Twitter, you said Pinterest, I think that's for shopping.
Recipes.
I would say that, you know, learning is something. It's the how. It's not necessarily always, you know, the what. So if Pinterest offers people like me who's a dyslexic a visual, I can learn faster. So for me, I can learn quicker by looking at a bunch of pictures that associate in a particular subject matter. So I think it's great. So any kind of these forums, it's all about the lifelong learning. It's not necessarily formal classroom. It's how we learn.
Right.
I learn visually. That's how I learn. So for me, I love Pinterest. So I think it all depends on the learner.
It's just unstructured, though, right? Unless you're doing a course where part of the course is to go on, let's say it's a home decorating course, and it's to go on Pinterest and find like 10 of the best ideas. But if you're just sort of on there, on YouTube, I mean, you might learn something, but it's completely just whatever you're absorbing and not.
Assuming there's intent, though, those are just, learning requires communication.
Yeah.
And those are communication tools. They're conduits and pipeline to connect information with willing learners.
I think for me, I think of social in terms of the creation of the content. And I think that part of the problem is that looking out in the space, you've got, I don't mean to pick on publishers. I think there are wonderful people out there who are publishers. But you've got publishers who are digitizing their content. And what they're doing is it's a very prescriptive model. They're saying this textbook is now available digitally. But if you're the teacher, we're saying this is the way you teach biology to your 8th grade class or your college class. And that may not be the way that people want to teach. And so it's very difficult for them to remix that. And I think if on the social side, you can get a more non-prescriptive model where people can remix content. Maybe the content comes from a McGraw-Hill or Pearson, so it's vetted, certified content, but allow people socially to develop best practices. This is how I like to teach biology from this content. And this is the way that he teaches it. And we can get together and talk about it. We can make our own playlists. And for that's very exciting on the social side. And I think that's what needs to happen to really unlock a lot of talent and passion around learning.
One more dovetailing off that, I really loved what you said. That McGraw-Hill or Pearson are deciding what I'm learning scares the shit out of me.
Well, they have been for a long time.
I know. That's why I'm struggling.
And now they're going to adaptively make sure it's in your head.
Yeah, again, they may have had an incredibly relevant, meaningful existence in the period before the current period now, and they are huge players now, so no doubt they have levers and they'll be able to be big players for a long time. They're not going away anytime soon. But the idea of a top-down method for learning, again, that's from the last century. I keep saying the last century, and I'm not talking just like 12 or 14, 15 years ago. I'm talking like 100 years ago. The same mentality was on. So what social allows more than anything we've talked about so far in the digital environment is this dynamic, what do I need to do to learn this thing?
It's also that just-in-time.
Yeah, it's just in time. All of those things are facilitated by the social componentry that we've got built into our culture, and it's decentralized and it's customized into a byte, a package that a variety of learners, whether you have dyslexia or you're a visual learner, or to me I think you really hit on something super important there. That's
and
smart.
I think what's interesting is then you can either use that learning, whether it's to pursue a degree.
Where are you? Oh.
I know.
I'm over here. I'm in the spotlight. To pursue a degree, a badge, a credential, a fun hobby. You can pursue that personalized, decentralized content in whatever way that you want. We do have another question, so here you go.
Hi, Eren Aksu with Haber News. And this question, you kind of answered it slightly just now. You mentioned that there was a factory setting, and especially in higher education, and that this came from about 100 years ago, and you're absolutely right. On this, you know what to study when you're 17. College it doesn't make that much sense anymore, and what you're supposed to learn, you're given to, and you can't necessarily use that and apply that in real life. So my question would be, do you see that sort of system changing, just as you mentioned through social media, but do you see the established system changing in the short term or the near term?
You're talking about 15, $20 billion companies. Nothing's happening very soon.
Well, they're saying, McGraw-Hill said they have 1 year, 7 months, 3 days, 2 weeks, whatever. They have a clock. They're counting down to the big change.
Can't wait.
Yeah. You're gonna adjust your watch.
The world's going to change in whatever she said timeline.
But, and I mean, they don't have a lot of incentive to change so fast, as you said, because they have an established business model. You want to stay free. On social, the business model is, you know, selling all those eyeballs to advertisers, targeting advertisers. So how do you stay free? Like, how are you going to stay?
Freemium.
Okay.
I looked at some of the businesses that have run away with their particular markets. There's lots of examples. LinkedIn, Dropbox, Pandora, Netflix. There's sort of, not Netflix, but there's a freemium component where you can get almost the entire experience for free. And the folks, at least in CreativeLIVE, the short version of the business model is that anyone in the world can watch for free while the education is happening live. And only if you want to own a copy of the content and watch it 100 times in the future, or rewind, fast forward, stop, do you own the content. So the fact that you can, if you want to learn everything on CreativeLIVE, you can for free. So to pretend that there isn't a business model where you do get the best of both worlds, and I'm guessing that a large part of the population that's sitting in this room, if you can learn you can get 20 hours of content from a Pulitzer Prize winner for $100, that's a pretty good deal, as opposed to going to a seminar, traveling across the country, putting yourself in a hotel room, and taking their $2,000 or $5,000 seminar. To be able to just press the $100 buy button and watch it whenever you want is a reasonable ask. And for those that can't, they will sit there for 3 days straight and watch it because it is of such great value. So that's the CreativeLIVE model is not the answer, but to pretend that there aren't models out there is really just a propagation of the legacy folks. So
We've got more questions. We're building a line over here.
Oh,
How about
wow.
that? Here you go.
Perfect. Makes my job easy.
So a question regarding perhaps populations that maybe don't have the knowledge of some of the technology, maybe senior citizen populations that have the desire to experience some of this lifelong learning, but don't, just have the capabilities, don't have the understanding of getting online and finding a course to expand their knowledge. Do you have any suggestions to fill those gaps where technology is just unfamiliar in those areas?
Eric, is there I'm thinking that your platform, if you can
Andrew,
give him
he's
the,
Eric.
oh, sorry.
It's okay.
No, but we look a lot alike.
If you can give them the basic access, and if your learning environment can be a repository for people that are in different socioeconomic status or different age group where memory might be more of an issue or less of an issue, it seems like you've got a solution.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you look at, you all know the company Lumosity that does brain training. And so they're saying by playing certain games, you can improve cognitive function and cognitive workload. They've tapped a lot of the silver generation. Or do you call them silver generation in America? I always, my Japanese kicks in. The senior generation who are flocking to this because they think that it's going to help keep them sharp and aware. And they're cracking into markets that probably were not as technology savvy, but they're getting online and figuring out. They're asking their kids. They're getting help, and they're doing it. I just think it's a matter of time.
I think it's also a blended model. They may have to do, senior people may have to go and be in an environment where they learn, and then it's supplemented by some kind of access to a terminal. I know my father just recently went to Verizon to learn how to use his smartphone, and he's 84. So that's lifelong learning, okay? He just learned how to use a phone. So it's, in that model, they catered to him, and they provided him the environment that he was could get access to. So I think
Yeah.
it's a blended model.
Younger family members, for sure. I have a 94-year-old grandmother, and my uncle helps her be on Facebook so she can, see what we're all doing. So.
All right, next question.
Hi, I work for a university, so this question might be a sin against my employer, but it kind of touches on what you were talking about, Chase, in this model being 100 years old, and really, how do you see shifting the culture? Our current culture is more of a degree-based culture to a competency-based culture.
There's actually a belief that it's a degree-based culture that I don't think it is. Like, that is eroding as I don't know, did I interrupt you? I'm sorry.
No.
Is that so I think we're living in a belief that there's a degree-based culture. And actually, the repercussions of that, there's $1.1 trillion in student debt in our country. It surpassed credit card debt. Not forgivable through bankruptcy or anything. That's crazy. So what that tells me is that there's a false narrative that's been going on for a pretty long time, which is that if you go to school and if you go to college, you're going to get a good job. Not true anymore. Not true. Just look at the economics. There's every bit of research, every shred of it says that if you go to a Ivy League school, your chances of getting a job are high. But as the world, look at Facebook, Google, Amazon, they're all they're hiring based on competency. At CreativeLIVE, we just hired a 20-year-old who is an amazing programmer. We don't care where he went to school at all.
Or if
And
he
by the way,
graduated.
the starters of those companies didn't graduate.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking at the future, if companies that are on the cutting edge, the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons, they might not be, that's up for debate, but if you think that they are, then looking at what they're doing, that is really the leading indicator on what kind of a culture I think we're either living in now or migrating to. I would look at the student debt plus what people that are actually kicking ass and taking names are doing, and none of it equals, I can't wait to get my 4-year degree so I can get a job. It's just it's fiction, actually.
Yeah,
Right.
basically, the way, another way to think about it is the degree as the only proxy of workplace success is less and less true going forward. So while the cost of the degree has continued to rise, the value of that degree when you can consider all these other ways that you can signal, an individual can signal their own competency to a prospective employer has increased. So there's that natural tension that's got to break at some point.
I think that everyone up here is pretty much agnostic to that, I'm guessing. I'm looking at yours. You guys, you're a repository for knowledge. Doesn't matter how they got the knowledge, where it came from. It's just that they have a continued access to it. And you guys are badging.
Right.
You don't care. So if this is sort of the future of lifelong learning, maybe it was influenced by the panel selection, but I think we've got a lot of leading indicators here. I don't think we need to keep.
Yeah,
How many of you guys have advanced degrees?
I quit too. I did. I quit both. I quit medical school and a PhD in the philosophy of art, because what are you going to do with that?
I also see it sort of, if it works, which I think it's going to, and there's a debate how quickly we'll get there, but the student will have access to all these systems to get knowledge where they think it should be achieved, and so they get a patchwork of these credentials, if you will, and that becomes essentially the mosaic of their degree. And so the question will eventually happen is do I look at the Harvard grad or the Ivy League grad who has that degree and that transcript, or do I look at the student who has all these collage of competencies? Who do I hire? Okay? And then once we get to that point where they start to say, well, wait a minute, I care more about the person who shows the experience, that's where we start to see it start to make the swing. And that's what we hope to facilitate.
Yeah, just to take a real life example, let's say you graduated and you want to work in marketing, okay? And you go and you interview for the job, and they ask you, okay, well, do you know anything about Google search engine optimization? All right. Do you know how to set up a campaign to run on Facebook's ad exchange? All right, next year, maybe it's Twitter's ad exchange. The year after that, maybe it's something to do with Snapchat. How do people continually keep up to speed on all these new things that they're supposed to learn when the existing education curricula does not change at the same pace that industry is changing because of technology? So the There's another natural tension to consider.
I will tell you that in the IT world, hiring programmers or developers is not based on degrees anymore. It's absolutely what can you solve, how do you solve this problem, and they're put to that test. Brian Whitmer is well, although he has a degree, I mean, I know what they go through to get programmers, and it's very rigorous, and it's not about whether they have a graduate degree or not.
I love the question, though.
All right, one more question.
Great.
Or two more, and then we're going to
Wrap it up.
Thank you. Pish Guha, HP, Hewlett Packard. A slightly different topic. So we all know the value of digital learning and all the stuff that it can do, the tracking, analysis, and adaptive learning, all the good stuff. I wanted to ask you guys about the value of paper in terms of learning. And by the way, what I'm going to talk about has nothing to do with my company here. So there have been research done not just in US, but in Western Europe and Scandinavian countries, which shows that if somebody learns something from a kind of a hybrid model, not just digital, but digital and paper, the retention seems to be higher. And that doesn't even factor in the distraction that a typical digital device can bring. So I'd like to get your opinion on that. I mean, do you see a hybrid model in future, or is it all pure digital?
Yeah, and I want to add to that. I've heard of some companies also now with online learning shipping manipulatives directly to the consumer, to the student. So that is interesting that we're seeing some of that trend as well. It's like going backwards.
What's paper? Does anybody know?
I've heard of this thing.
Notes.
So is this just a question around, more around blended learning?
Yeah, digital only
He wants paper.
versus
Yeah, and paper.
using
Digital.
tactile or other.
Yeah, so digital only versus digital and paper, and the paper doesn't have to be a book. It can be a chapter or a few chapters together, kind of like an iTunes model, but a hybrid model, not just pure digital.
I think it depends on the content, right? There's some stuff that just exists in the digital world. I don't know how you teach Photoshop with paper. I mean, I guess you could have a book about Photoshop, but I think it's a little bit depending on. But I think there is something to being able to touch stuff, right? And I think that's part of what's nice about mobile, because mobile, you have a very intimate relationship with your device, and you can hold your device, and you're effectively holding and engaging with the same content a very different way than when you're sitting at a computer and you're looking at a screen. And so maybe it'd be interesting to look at the research, but maybe with mobile you get some of that transference of effect that you're talking about that they're seeing with paper.
I think also it might be that paper might be replaced by something else now. So for example, our online experience is very much engaged in discussion. So discussion groups and peer groups online perhaps are supplementing what may have been done previously on paper, although it's not a one-to-one, but it may now be replacing what may be something else that they were doing on paper. So it's a different experience. It's a more rich experience. When you're online, you're actually interacting with people from all over the world, and different cultures. So the people who say that online learning is you have to do it in person, well, you would lose out on the opportunity to interact with somebody internationally and hear their point of view. So I think what you may be finding is that although I agree paper for me certainly is important, being a visual person, but having that interactivity may be supplementing something that I may be lacking with the paper.
If
Interesting.
paper provides an experience for the learning, to me it's relevant. And that paper could be substituted with lots of other things. If you're going to learn how to play the guitar, then you're going to want to play it either on a device where you can mimic the guitar or the guitar itself. So I understand the basis of your question is really about paper, the tie to HP. But I think the question that is maybe that precipitates from that in the future and now and going forward is it's a blended of experiential and digital.
You can print a guitar now.
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Hi, my name is Naho, and I do investing and business development at Mitsui Global Investment. And I have a question, especially for, I think it will be for Chase and Dennis. I feel that like MOOCs, which are for you doing university classes, they are still struggling to make the business model, whereas like adult MOOCs are becoming profitable and have the business model. So I want to know what kind of challenges you have and the next step you're thinking. Thank you.
So just so everybody's clear in terms of how our business works, our business model is very similar to an app store. All right, so an individual expert or content owner, instructor can come onto our platform, they can teach a course, they can make that course free if they so choose, they own the intellectual property associated with that, or they can price it. And if they make a course sale, then we take a percentage of that. Okay, so in terms of challenges for our business model, which is effectively a marketplace that's got two sides, it's got instructors on one side, students on the other, it's very straightforward. We're all about driving liquidity and scale on both sides of the equation. So more instructors, better quality content will ultimately drive more students. More students who spend more money will attract higher quality instructors and more instructors teaching different topics, and kind of goes around in a circle, if you will. So.
And with regard to the business models, creativeLIVE is in an interesting position because we were profitable from day one. And we elected to take venture money at a certain point to help us scale and grow more quickly than you could off organic growth and organic revenue. But it's absolutely possible, and that's the part that when I look at the opportunities for innovation and the new companies that are represented here on the couches and throughout the online space, they don't have all of the answers, but I'm banking for them to provide a solution, for us to provide more solutions than the incumbents. And the incumbents have all of the resources. They have 95% of the resources, and innovation doesn't necessarily happen with resources. The innovator's dilemma is actually sort of wound in there. And so just the fact that we have a business model that anyone in the world can participate in a creativeLIVE course for free, in every creativeLIVE course for free. There's more than 500 of them online. To me, and yet we were profitable until we decided actively not to be. To me, that is an indicator that we're not in trouble going forward. We're in trouble with the part of the legacy part that we have to, because they aren't going to be able to move into these sort of provocative, interesting or different business models that allow for some of the opportunity that I think is the basis of your question.
You don't think they'll try to buy you?
Oh, they've tried several times.
You didn't build your company to sell it to one of these guys? Wasn't that your goal?
No, if that would have been my goal, I'd have been out of here a long time ago.
You'd be surfing by now.
I also think that the MOOC is an opportunity for conversion. Okay, so the freemium model, if you will, so it gives a lot of these opportunities for people to taste, if you will, the courseware, and then decide to move on. And you heard this morning during edX's presentation, their end goal is to sell you a certificate at the end of the day. So, and hopefully convert those students over into full-time students. So I think part of the MOOC opportunity is a marketing opportunity for most of these places, and then they move over to a paid value proposition. So I think the MOOC is serving a purpose. It's not necessarily that's the economic model. It's not free, obviously.
But it's one of them.
Sorry, one other point. I think the question about MOOCs, the good thing about MOOCs is it's getting a lot of people interested in learning. And there's one takeaway that I would ask for everyone in the audience, which historically in our culture, I can't speak for the Japanese culture, although I've spent enough time in there just to say, arigatou gozaimasu, but, and biru o nomemasu, too. I can drink beer. But that historically in our culture, to say I don't know has come from a position of weakness. It's come from a position, no one wanted to raise their hand and say, I'm a learner, I want to learn. It was historically like, I don't know, I'm not going to put my hand up. So if you guys could take one thing away from this, from at least my hopeful look into the future, it would be that learning and always learning is an incredibly positive human, it's a privilege, it's an amazing opportunity that we have, and we're at a time more than any other time in the history of the world where you can learn every single day. So I hope that you can take that away from a panel on lifelong learning.
Okay, one last question and then we're wrapping it up.
Hello. My question revolves around motivation. Now, there's a lot of research to suggest that if you learn something from intrinsic motivation, retention is a lot higher and a lot better. But from what you said earlier about going to school and doing something for a gold star, or you do it for a degree, that leads me to believe that our culture is based around extrinsic motivation. What would be a good way to kind of shift it more to promote intrinsic motivation?
Probably teach people stuff they need to know, right? So you're talking about folks who are getting hired not based upon a degree, but based on their expertise, their knowledge of SEO. I think, you know, the chance to come to one of these companies and learn what is relevant for your career, not something that somebody 150 years ago thought was interesting to teach people, is very, very key. And that will, I think, shift the motivation dramatically.
Anyone else?
I think still as a culture, we still like rewards. And that the example was earlier, take away the scoreboard, the soccer game means nothing. So I think you
That's
always,
not true. Do you believe that, though?
I do. I played the game for 14 years. And only to win or lose, right? But in the end of the day, you want that recognition. That becomes part of your brand equity. It becomes part of your social equity. It gives you a goal. And we do have learned, especially through these games that my sons play continuously. The more that they play with no instruction whatsoever, the more they power up, the bigger gun they have, the more people they can take out online. So that's what they're trying to do. They're motivated by the achievement.
Yeah, well, and even as a parent, I mean, I've been really captivated by this sort of unschool or the free democratic school model that's all self-directed. And that's, you know, in the K through 12 model, there are a few of them out there where the whole premise is that you're going to learn more and more if you are learning things that you're interested in and building sort of curricula and learning around whatever your kids like showing interest in.
Nice use of the plural of curriculum.
Did I say that?
You nailed it.
Oh, good. Well, thanks everybody for a great discussion. Yeah.